last 10 years, presented by one of the most renowned, speaker on the subject, Mr. Sachin. Sachin sir has been supporting and serving IT corporate last 24 years, been part of large companies, Cognizant, SunGard, FIS now, and from quite a number of years now, been coaching, mentoring, training, providing consulting support in the field of Agile. He's well certified almost all the major certifications which is under Agile umbrella. So that was about Sachin, and let's hope that it would be interactive and very knowledgeable and enlightening session for all of us. Over to you, Sachin sir.
Yeah, thanks, Navjot. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. I hope it's coming up now, and also I'm clearly audible. My audio video settings working fine. If someone can confirm.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. So we'll spend a few hours, maybe an hour or so, just exploring what this means, what Agile is about and why bother about Agile, etc. So I'll try to keep it in simple terms, in very layman terms, without getting into any technical details, just to maybe get a hang of what the concept is all about. Before we get into details, let me quickly introduce myself, although Navjot did some introduction. But quickly, a little bit about me. So I'm from Pune, born and brought up here. I come from an engineering background. I've done my MBA also from SIBM. Total 25, close to 25 years experience now. Worked in the industry for about 15 years, started off as a programmer, eventually got into lead management roles. And since last about 9+ years now, been working in Agile training and consulting coaching. Presently also I'm working with a couple of customers to implement Agile in their context. And of course, I'm also doing some trainings as and when I get the opportunities. I've also authored one book on Agile, and so I have some experience, some know-how about Agile, and that's what I wanted to share with all of you. So what we will cover during these couple of hours, or maybe about 90 minutes or so, because I would like to leave last 15-20 minutes for some Q&A, question and answers. So what we'll cover basically is what is this, what is Agile? In simple terms, in dictionary terms, if you refer the meaning of Agile, it is flexibility. Agility is flexibility or nimbleness. So what is this about when it comes to projects or any work basically we do? And then why do we need this flexibility, or why Agile? Why it has become kind of popular nowadays, and why should we bother about it? So what problems does it try to solve, or why it has got some attention? Then what is Scrum? I mean, we also hear about Scrum and we also talk about Agile. Then what is the difference between these two, or are they same? So we'll maybe spend a few minutes about that, and we'll see briefly what is Scrum. Then we'll also talk about, is it only for software development? I mean, basically this originated in the IT world, more for software development. But then is it only for that, or can I use it in other fields also, or is it applicable in some of the other areas also? So we'll see those as some of the examples where, according to me, it can be a concept which is applicable or which can be applied elsewhere as well. So we'll see some examples of it as we go along. Although it originated in IT or software industry, but then as a concept, it can be very well applicable in other fields or domains also. At least that is my personal belief. I'll share some of these examples also. And then what's the future of this? I mean, it's been around for more than 20 years now. I mean, there was something called as Agile Manifesto, which is like a formal values and principles of Agile, which came into existence somewhere in 2001, which is more than 20 years back. And as such, the concept of Agile methods has been around for more than 20 years. So it's been a while that this approach is there in the industry. Now it has kind of settled down, at least in the IT industry, although not like fully matured, but it has found its feet. So then what's the future? What else can we expect from this in the coming years? And if I want to learn more about it, maybe some sources or resources where I can refer. And of course, we'll have some questions towards the end. So that's what briefly we'll talk about. In all of these discussions, we'll try to keep it generic. I'll not get into any software or any technical terms. It will be simple layman terms explanation or concept discussion. So let's start with the first topic, our first agenda item, which is we'll just talk about why Agile, meaning why everyone is talking about this and what's the benefit and why should I even learn more about Agile. Um, Before I go further, just to confirm once more, all the setup is working okay, right? I mean, I'm clearly audible, screen share, everything working fine. I'm just checking in between before we get into details. Can someone confirm? Hello? I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, it's fine, Sachin.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay,
Yes.
cool. Thank you. Okay. So now some people felt that nowadays, or at least last few years, the environment in which we work and the work itself that we have been doing is full of these terms, that is VUCA. I'm sure you must have heard of this. If not, we'll see what it means. Basically, all the environment in which we work or the work content that we do day in, day out is volatile. Volatile in the sense something which is not very stable, asthira, that is volatile. Second, there is a lot of uncertainty. Things keep changing. Something which is known today may change tomorrow also, and can apply to almost all the content of the world: technology, people, requirement, customers, context, market, competitor, etc., etc. Then the complexity, the work that we do, the systems that we build, the applications that we work on, are fairly complex. And lastly, it is ambiguous. Ambiguous means not everything is completely visible. You can see only so much. And we have to still work on that. We have to give commitments. We have to give some estimates. We have to work out some plans. And while we are in an environment which is fairly unpredictable, because it is full of all these volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, uh, things cannot be predictable, or the environment in which we work is fairly unpredictable. Whereas we are expected to be predictable. That means if I come up with some kind of a plan, if I come up with some kind of an estimate, then I'm supposed to be accurate with that. I'm supposed to be predictable. If I say that something will happen in, say, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, then it has to happen. I'm supposed to be predictable in an unpredictable world. Now, how do you balance this? Meaning the work itself is so much unpredictable. The environment in which we work is unpredictable. While on the other side, I'm supposed to be predictable in such an unpredictable circumstances. So how do you balance this? And that's where when people started thinking about this concept of bringing predictability in an unpredictable context, then they started seeing some correlation. That is something to do with the amount of work that we battle at the time. So if you pick up a large work, a bigger project, a bigger program, or a large work, then larger the work, larger will be the percentage of this VUCA. That is, more the work, more will be the uncertainty, more will be the complexity, more will be the ambiguity. Naturally, more will be the chances that such a work is likely to be interrupted or there will be a change in direction. And hence, it affects the chances of being predictable or being successful with such a work. So then somewhere people started seeing an inverse correlation between the size of the work that you battle with and the chances of the success of that particular work. So if I work on a fairly large amount of work, larger the work, more will be the variables and lesser will be the chances of being successful or predictable. Whereas if I break this into small chunks and if I work on a small piece at a time, lesser the work, lesser will be the complexity, lesser will be the unknowns, more will be the chances of me being predictable. So one way to increase the predictability will be to break the work that I'm working on into small chunks and then battle one small chunk at a time. Divide and conquer, like what the others did to us for centuries. We will try to do it with the work that we are supposed to deal with. So if we can divide the work into small parts, smaller parts will become more manageable, more predictable. Sounds logical. Another thing is with all this VUCA around, that is volatility, uncertainty around, we are also supposed to make decisions. Decisions about how many people we need, when something will finish, what should be done, how it should be done, so on and so forth. And most of the times we feel that I wished I had more information. I wished I had 70% more information. I would have made a far better decision. And most of the times that information is not there. And we still have to make a decision. Now, some people felt that now you have two choices. One is you wait for all the clarity, all the information, and then make a decision, or make a decision and then be good at quickly recognizing the flaws in your decision and course correcting those. So that means if we become good at course correcting, that means I make a decision. That's okay. I may not know everything. I make a decision and move on. But I assume that the decisions could be flawed because I'm making some decisions on a very less information at hand. But then can I be good at course correcting? That means as I make progress, I will make some adjustments. If if I can become better at it, then being wrong with some initial decisions can be less expensive than not making a decision itself, which also sounds reasonably correct. It sounds logical. Hmm? So now, based on this, basically comes the concept of something called empiricism. Empiricism and Scrum, which is one of the agile methods, and we'll see later what is Scrum and how is it related to agile, etc. But Scrum as a framework or as a concept is based on empiricism and lean thinking. If you let me highlight the first line, it says it's based on empiricism and lean thinking. So I picked up this snippet from something called as Scrum Guide, which describes what is Scrum, an official source of Scrum. The very first line of the Scrum Guide says that Scrum is based on something called empiricism and lean thinking. Now, what is empiricism? The next line describes it. Empiricism means uh, capitalizing on the knowledge that I will gain based on the work that I will be doing. And then based on that experience, knowledge that I get, making decisions based on what I observe. So because every work or every project that I'll be working on is unique. Just because something worked on the other project doesn't mean that it will work for my project, may or may not. So as I start working on something, I'll get some experience. I'll get some experience based knowledge. And if I can leverage that so that I can start making decisions based on what I observe, based on my actual experiential learning, that is empiricism, which means I apply course corrections, then it will be better. And Scrum as an approach or any agile method as an approach is based on these two things, that is empiricism and lean thinking. Now, why this is essential is because if you relate to the previous slide, basically when we begin any such journey, which we call as project, program, whatever, there is a lot of unknowns or there is a lot of uncertainty. We know less information. We know less about our teams, our content, our technology, etc., etc., and we still have to make decisions. So the decisions made here might be wrong, can be wrong, or they will be flawed because you can't possibly know everything as you begin that journey. And it is going to be the experience is going to be like driving at night in fog, right? It's driving at night in fog. You can see only so much. And therefore, as you begin this journey is also called as cone of uncertainty. That is, there is a lot of unknowns in the initial part of that project, whatever we start working on. And as we spend more time with that particular work, we'll know more about the content. We know more about the context, about the customers, about the people, about the technology, etc., etc. And then the unknowns will reduce, right? Because we know more about it. Huh? Knowledge is opposite of uncertainty. So that is what will happen. But then can I use this additional knowledge that I'm going to get based on my actual experience, which is nothing but empiricism, bring it into the context of the work that I'm doing and apply some course corrections. So if you relate to the last slide, basically we need to be good at applying course corrections because we won't know everything at the beginning. For that, we need early feedback, because if I have to apply some course correction, that means I might have made a decision and I want to quickly uncover if there is something wrong with that decision, and then make some course correction so that I correct that decision and hopefully it becomes a better decision over a period. But for that, it is important that we need some feedback, right? So we saw this on the previous slide. That is, we need to be good at applying course correction. But for me to become good at applying course correction, I need feedback, right? So because if I don't get any feedback on something that I have assumed or I have made some decisions on, then I won't be able to make any course correction. So I need a feedback. I need early feedback, and not just once, multiple times, several times into this cone of uncertainty, especially in the early days of that journey. Because when as I start working on something new, something which I have not done in the past, something which my team has not done in the past, there will be lots of unknowns. And if I can get early feedbacks in those early days, based on the feedback, then I will be able to make some course corrections. I think the picture on the right hand side depicts it very nicely. That is, if I can move in small steps, it will become more easy for me to manage that journey rather than big leaps I'm trying to take. So basically, can I break the work that I'm going to do into small parts and then apply empiricism, that is get early feedback, so that the sooner I know more about some flaws in the decisions, the better it will be, because I can start applying some course corrections. But then how do I apply course correction? Meaning I can, how do I get this feedback? How do I get some feedback onto whatever I have thought of, whether it is good, bad, is it working, not working, etc. Because if I don't get a feedback, I cannot apply course correction. So how do I bring in some mechanism to get the early feedbacks? And that is where comes the concept of something called as a learning cycle. Because the idea is that knowledge is opposite of uncertainty, and we are into that cone of uncertainty. So we need to get as much as knowledge as possible, and based on that apply course correction. That is nothing but empiricism. And as we saw, any agile method, and Scrum is one of them, is something which is based on empiricism. It leverages empiricism. Empiricism is a foundation, experience-based learning and applying timely course corrections. So then they introduce the concept of something called as a plan, do, check, adjust cycle. It's also called as a learning cycle. You might have heard about this already. It is also called as a Deming cycle because it was introduced by somebody called Deming. But the concept here is that I take some work, I plan it, then I do it. And the first two steps of this cycle are called as, or they relate to some kind of an action. So here I take some action. Plan maybe is an action on paper, which I plan, which I imagine on paper. And second, do, where I take that action actually on the ground. So plan and do, first two steps relate to some kind of an action that we take either on paper or on the ground. Then based on actual steps that we have taken, that is do versus plan, we check whether what we thought, assumed on paper, is it working or not working. And if it is not working, if something is working, something is not working, we check as to why it is not working, why something is working, so that either I can start doing something new or continue to do something if it is helping, or stop doing something if it is not really helping me, so that I make some adjustments. And then those adjustments become a feedback loop, or they loop back into my next cycle. So like this, we iterate. Then it becomes iteration. Iteration is nothing but repeated cycle. That's the dictionary meaning, iteration. So if you are familiar with Surya Namaskar, that is iterations. Okay, it's a repeated cycle, right? So you make those 12 moves in Surya Namaskar and continue to do that again and again. That is iterative, something like this. So I will have plan, do, check, adjust cycle, and not just once. I will do this multiple times in the course of my project, program, whatever work that I'm doing, so that I will get multiple opportunities to plan something, do something, check if it is working, not working, why it is not working, and then make some adjustment. The adjustments will be a loop back into next plan, do, check, adjust cycle, and so on and so forth. So for instance, if I have if I'm going to do something which is for say 6 months, there's some work that I have to plan for 6 months. I'm just taking some number, it can be anything. 6 months, then can I break that into that 6 month? Can I break that into 1 month, 1 month, 6 mini projects. So let's say I'm going to do some project for 6 months. Then how about breaking it into 6 mini projects of 1 month each? Relate to the first slide that we saw. Lesser the work, lesser the VUCAs, more the chances of being predictable. So instead of battling with 6 month worth of work, let's zoom in into 4 weeks only at a time. So a small bit at a time. And then overlap this plan, do, check, adjust cycle onto these 1 month windows 6 times. So that way, then for every 1 month, I plan, I do, I check, adjust. Then again next month, plan, do, check, adjust. Again next month, plan, do, check, adjust, and so on and so forth. So now that 6 month journey gets planned 6 times. So I can plan and do something and check and adjust and replan or better plan the next time. And I can do this like 6 times within that 6 month window. So that's how I get opportunities to get the feedbacks, or I get some feedback and then make adjustments. So I start implementing the course corrections. Or this is one way to bring in some kind of a mechanism to get the feedback and apply course corrections. Now, naturally, if you see the previous slide, we need shorter feedback cycles, that is quicker feedbacks. Earlier or the sooner I know something is working, not working, the better it is. So now if I have same 6 month project, instead of breaking it into 1 month, 6 windows, how about breaking it into 2 week, 12 windows? So it's 6 months. So then I go 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks like this 12 times. Now I get 12 plan, do, check, adjust cycles, and I get 12 opportunities to get some feedback and make some adjustments. So it depends. Basically, I need feedback. I need early feedback so that I can make early adaptations. More the unknowns, more the complexity, more the volatility, etc. Shorter should be my feedback loops so that I get that feedback quickly and I can have multiple opportunities to make some adjustments or course corrections. Basically, if there is some bad news lying in the system, that is, maybe we have not estimated something correctly, maybe we have not made a right design decision, maybe we do not have the right team in place, or we have overcommitted something, whatever it could be, there will always be some bad news. uh, can I surface that bad news early? In the early 1 or 2 cycles, if we can surface this, the bad news early, then can become actually a good news. So the whole thing is about getting early feedback and make timely course corrections. Fail fast. If at all there is a failure, fail fast. So basically, as I mentioned, this approach originated from software development. So we'll just briefly see how people were doing software development once upon a time and how this approach uh, flips the concept of early feedbacks and accelerates that feedback so that we can make timely course corrections. Now, this picture tries to show the two ways of working. Again, there is nothing right or wrong here. There is nothing like waterfall is not at all correct and agile is super perfect, etc. There's nothing which is perfect in this world. Everything has its own pros and cons. This is the intent of this slide is not to compare or contrast or in any way compare the two approaches. Just that there's two ways of working. Now, when we worked earlier, we have been doing projects. So, only thing is earlier we used to follow this kind of an approach where we used to do work in some steps. That is, do something, then design, then implementation. Is a typical software development cycle. Now, suppose this used to take 6 months, for example, this whole thing, like from here till here, if it was taking few months, let's say 6 months, then as I mentioned some time back, it's about cutting it into small cycles. So how about cutting this into some 6, 12 cycles of 2 weeks each, wherein in each of this 1 month or 2 weeks time box, or it's like I'm doing mini projects now, these mini projects. So in each of this, so I treat this as a mini project of 1 month or 2 weeks, something like that. And in each of this cycle, I will do all of this together, because each of this step, that is design, gives me some kind of a feedback on the requirements. And when I actually start implementing something, actually start doing work, I get a feedback on something that was imagined on paper in terms of requirements and design. So every next step is actually a feedback to the previous ones. For example, design is a feedback on the requirements, implementation we'll have a feedback on the previous two, and then final testing, etc., or verification, we'll also have a feedback on the previous three. So now there was feedback here also. However, something which was imagined on paper and thought to be correct started getting feedback maybe somewhere here or at times somewhere here. And people felt that it was probably a little late because this is where you end your journey. And if I start getting a feedback towards the end about some flaws in some early decisions that were made, that becomes difficult to catch up or make any adjustments. So that is where they started thinking of an alternative approach where we started breaking the same work into small chunks. It's like doing mini projects of, let's say, 2 weeks or 4 weeks each. And then each of this 2 weeks project will do all of this into these 2 weeks. So I'll do analysis till testing. And of course, I'll pick a small set of work, small bunch of work, and I'll repeat this cycle, complete requirement analysis to testing in this fixed time window of 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever is appropriate that I take. And I keep doing this multiple times, at least maybe 6, 7 times. And each of this cycle will also be a plan, do, check, adjust cycle. That means I plan with something, then I do that work, then I check, and then I make some adjustments. And this adjustment helps me to better plan the next cycle and so on and so forth. So like this, some people felt that if I implement this kind of an approach, that is, first of all, I break the work into small chunks. So it reduces the amount of unknowns and increases the chances of predictability. Because now if I'm zooming in into like 2 weeks or 4 weeks only, I'm taking a small chunk of work, and then that plan only for next 2 weeks or 4 weeks, only that much work, there's better chance of me being predictable than maybe a 6 month worth of plan. So that is one. And then second, I bring in that plan, do, check, adjust cycles into these time boxes. That means if I'm breaking this into 2 week, 12 cycles for a 6 month period, then I get 12 opportunities to plan something, do something, check something, and adjust it. And then I keep doing it. That is how I get the feedback, not just the feedback, but I get an accelerated feedback. So I start getting early insights, early insights into what is working, what is not working, so that we apply the course corrections. So if you tie back to the first slide, it's basically about becoming good at applying course corrections. For that, we need feedback. And some people felt that this approach of breaking it into small parts and then iterating, repeating the cycles, will be a good idea to get the early feedback or accelerate the feedback so that we can apply timely course corrections. So that if you leverage this, it automatically starts bringing in empirical adjustment in the sense what is actually happening in the context of my work, my project, my team, my customer, my team working together. What is working, what is not working, and then we make those adjustments. Short feedback loops. The idea is as it's shown on the slide, basically map it to that picture of cone of uncertainty. So we start with lots of unknowns to begin with, less knowns. But as I spend maybe 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks into this, I know more about it, and more knowledge will reduce the unknowns. So that based on that additional knowledge that I keep getting, I am able to continuously improve something every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, whatever suits my context, so that I can bring in continuous improvement instead of a delayed perfection or a big scramble at the end. So some people felt maybe this can be a very useful approach where we cut the work into small parts, zoom in into maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks only at a time. That automatically reduces the unknowns, increases the chances of that work being predictable, and then we get multiple opportunities to inspect and adapt. So the main intent of any organization adapting an agile approach is to reduce the time to learning. That is the most important, because those who will learn fast and get the knowledge fast will always have the edge. So that through that learning, we continuously improve, as we saw on the previous slide. Continuous improvement is always better than delayed perfection. If we get this structured approach, that is every 2 weeks we plan to check, adjust, plan to check, adjust, then we can continuously improve our product, something that we are building step by step, small chunk by chunk, and also the process with which we are building that product. Because we'll get something every 2 weeks. We can review that, make sure that we are building the right thing. We can get feedback on that as well as the process with which we are building it can also be looked at and tailored if required or adjusted if required. If we focus on the first two, the third one should be a byproduct. It should automatically happen. That is, if the team is able to continuously review and adapt the output that they are producing, plus the process with which they are producing that output, and there is a continuous focus on improving both of these, the team's performance is naturally going to be better. It will automatically improve. It has to be just a byproduct. It will automatically happen. So basically, this approach, which is based on empiricism, any agile approach is like this, which is based on empiricism, has three pillars. There are three main pillars of this approach. There has to be transparency. So if something is not working, something is broken, we have made wrong estimates, we have overcommitted something, or whatever it is, if there is a flaw in design decisions or in whatever we are doing, if there is a flaw in something, it should not be hidden. Because if something which is hidden, you can never inspect something which is hidden. You cannot find out why something is not working when it is not even visible. And if you cannot inspect uh, what is not working, you can never adapt anything. You cannot change anything. And if you cannot change anything, then you cannot improve, right? To improve is to change. But then for me to change something, I need to inspect what is working, not working. For that, it has to be made visible. So transparency is important. If you start hiding problems, you cannot, there's no meaning of any feedback loop. So these become three pillars: transparency, inspection, adaptation. And these are pillars of the Scrum also as an approach. So if you refer to Scrum guide, they talk about these pillars. Now, if we do not pay attention to timely feedback and early insights into what is working, not working, naturally there is a consequence of a delayed feedback. We will end up having maybe a big mess at the end, and there's a big scramble. There's a lot of anxiety. What is working? What is not working? Will it happen? There's a lot of stress in general in the system when we are not able to get a pulse of some timely adjustments, or we have not done timely adjustments. Now, prevention is always better than cure. That is what is taught to us since childhood. So that is what this approach says. Maybe you can detect something early and then try to prevent it. Now, so that's the concept. I mean, some people felt that maybe if I can break this into small chunks and I can iterate over it. So the approach becomes iterative and incremental. Iterative means what? Iteration means repeated cycles. So I'm repeating the cycles, repeating the cycle of analysis to testing several times, and also the plan, do, check, adjust several times. So that I get early feedback and adjustments. And every iteration, I'm getting some small output, some small chunks come out. So if I follow this approach of breaking work into small chunks and working iteratively, I get an approach which is called as agile. It's referred to as an agile approach. Now, what is meant by agile? Agile is flexibility. It is flexibility, flexible. Agile means flexible. So if I go with this approach, some people felt that we will, or this approach will bring flexibility. Flexibility in terms of changes. Changes to what? Anything, because anything can change. My design can change, my team can change, my estimate can change, my plan can change, requirements can change, customer can change, context can change, competitor can change. So several things which can change. Now, if I'm moving in short cycles and I'm getting early feedbacks and I'm zooming in 2 weeks at a time, and I get early insights and I can make timely adjustments, then hopefully this approach will provide some kind of a flexibility in terms of adjusting changes or responding to changes. And that is where these approaches were called as agile. Agile means flexible. That's the main intention of these approaches, basically flexibility to being responsive to the changes. Now, as I mentioned, it originated with software industry. So some practitioners from the software industry, actually 17 different people, they experimented this kind of an approach somewhere in 1990s. And naturally, I had my own app. For example, I was one of these 17 people. I had my own approach, and maybe I called it as feature-driven development. You had some approach, something conceptually similar to what we discussed, like small chunks and iterative incremental, but you had your own approach and you called it as Scrum. Somebody called it as extreme programming, and so on and so forth. So these people were actual practitioners from the software development background. And these guys tried all these approach, and somewhere in 2001 they came together, they shared their experiences, and then they unified under one single umbrella. And that is where all these approaches, or this concept, or a new way of developing software was called as agile. I mean, these people, these 17 people, chose to call their approach as agile. So it originated from the software industry. But can I apply this, or is it only for software development? Now, well, to start with, at least it has to be applied well enough in software, at least, and not everywhere. At least based on my experience, it's not like it's super matured and everywhere it's being applied with the correct, true spirit, right intent. Maybe there are gaps, but at least it has originated from there and it's slowly stabilizing in the software industry. The question is this concept going to be only for software development, or is it applicable elsewhere as well? Now, it can be applicable elsewhere as well, and literally to any other things that also we do on a day-to-day basis. For example, we'll see the other industries also, but let's see if I can apply this agile approach on some day-to-day things that we have to do, or our kids have to do, or anybody has to do. For example, what if I have to study for an exam? And I'm sure if you remember how we used to study for the exam, we used to have exam in 6 months, right? And we used to study for the exam when we all know. And there used to be big pile of work, lots of things to study, like you can see on this screen, and then so much to do at this. And then at the end, at the very end, you will get this bad news that shit, I'm not very good at mathematics or whatever subject. And in the last few days only that bad news will surface. There's not much you can do when only 15 days or a month left for the exam. Then you will do these night outs, etc., big anxiety at the end, and so on and so forth. So if I have to study, now I have two options. I can study like a waterfall approach, where I study all these different subjects, I try to memorize them, maybe do some revision, and then there is an examination. Or, and basically this is something which happens once in 6 months only, but then I'll start getting some feedback that, well, I'm not really very prepared, and there are gaps, and then the anxiety increases somewhere here, and that's like very at the end of that loop. Whereas if you flip that and break it into same approach, like where you will have maybe an exam every 2 weeks or every 1 week or something like that, where I break the study, the same thing, into small chunks, and then work on small chunk at a time, and I will have some validation done at the end of every 2 weeks. Naturally, I will have to prioritize, right? So something which is more difficult, something which I feel that I find it difficult. Again, it will depend, right? I mean, you may find maths very easy, I may find it very difficult. Something which is very difficult, complex for me, obviously I cannot leave it at the end, because getting a feedback on that at the end will be very difficult. If I can get that feedback early here, saying, well, I'm struggling here, I can do something about it because I have time at hand, and the chances that I will be successful are higher. So this approach, where I break into small parts and then iterate small chunks and incrementally knock off different subjects, get better prepared with it, and if at all there is a feedback, or there is there's something which is not working, I will get to know that early. The bad news early, fail fast, so that we can make some course corrections. So this can apply here also. To be honest, I'm actually experimenting this with my son's studies now, right? So he's studying. So you have subjects like maths, science, English, Marathi, Sanskrit, etc., etc. You organize it like that. Maths or English also can break, like grammar. Grammar can break further into adjectives, adverbs, nouns, something like that, or writing skills like essays, etc., etc. Focus on one or two things at a time. Take something for a week, prepare, have some validation done at the end of every week, and keep doing this. And something which is more complex, according to you, if you find maths or English to be difficult, do it first, not at the end, uh, because that will increase the chances of being successful with that, and you get early feedback, early course correction. So that's one example where you can apply this, besides software. Now, what if I have to write a book? So I experimented this. I have written a book about Agile using Agile approach. So if I have to write a book, again, there's a lot of work here. So if I have to write like 200 pages, there's a lot of content that I have to write, and maybe it goes through this cycle. So I have to ideate and come up with some content, and I write that somewhere. Then it goes to proofreading. Somebody reads it and then gives me a feedback on that, and then it goes to actual print setting, and then final print. Now, if you just consider the proofread and this, imagine, for example, I write 200 pages of content and I give it to proofreading. There's a lot of work, 200 pages. The one who is going to do proofreading is going to be overwhelmed by 200 pages to be read. And then the same person is going to give me 200 pages worth of feedback. Lots of feedback will come back to me, and now I'll be overwhelmed to receive that feedback to make some changes on it. Uh, Instead of that, how about breaking it into small parts? That is, I break this book into chapters. Anyways, you have sections into this book. So focus on 1 or 2 chapters only at a time. Let's say 10 pages only at a time. Get that content ready. Get the proofreading ready, done. So it's only 10 pages. So the one who is going to review it is also not overwhelmed. I get a feedback on the 10 pages. I work on it. I will make sure that the same 10 mistakes or same mistakes which I did in the first 10 pages are not going to be repeated here. Right. So for example, if the proofreading gives or proofreader gives me a feedbacks about lots of punctuation marks, some grammar mistakes, full stop, comma, double quote, hyphen, some words, etc., in the first 10 pages. Now, based on that, obviously, I will learn from it. And in the next 10 pages that I will create and give it for proofreading, I'll prevent those errors, right? I'll for sure minimize those. If I don't do that, the same mistake would have repeated on all the 200 pages. But if I get that feedback in first 10 pages, I will not make the same mistake in the remaining 190 pages. So automatically I reduce the errors, and the quality automatically improves. Not just the early feedback, the quality also will improve. This is true for any work that you do. I'm just taking an example of a book here. Same is true when it goes here. So for example, finally, when you give it to actual printing and somebody who is going to print your stuff, now that person again has a feedback. He may say that, oh, this alignment is not correct, this formatting is not correct, this image size has to change, this font has to change, and all of that. Now imagine this feedback coming on 200 pages. It disturbs the whole thing. Instead of that 5-10 pages, you try it, try actually setting it and change maybe the font or whatever feedback you get only on the first 10 pages. Remaining 190 will go foolproof. And then actually print it incrementally. Make sure that 5-10 pages are actually printed. You see something and it looks perfect to you. And then keep doing it every few weeks. You will be in more control of this work rather than doing in big chunks of all the 200 pages of content, then 200 pages of proofreading, and then 200 pages of printing, and so on and so forth. So you can apply it there as well. So working in small chunks and early feedback loops. That is the whole intent. Another example could be that if you have to prepare some kind of a presentation like this one that I have created. Now, this work also goes through some steps. So I have to come up with the content, I have to refine that content, I have to use some formatting, the images, then review of that, and then final presentation. All right. So that this is what has happened with this slide deck also, which I'm using now. Now, same thing applies. So if I have like 50 slides, then instead of creating all the 50 slides, then doing all the formatting for 50 slides, then again a review of all the 50 slides, how about breaking it into small chunks? So I create maybe 5 slides, some section, get it reviewed through somebody, get the formatting done, everything ready. So at least I know that some part of the presentation is ready, and so on and so forth. And then finally, when I'm going for the presentation, it is done. There's no anxiety. All the review, all the feedback is well incorporated, and I have built it incrementally. So the reviewer, the one who is going to review it, the one who is going to format it, the one who is going to actually create the content, they benefit from the short feedback loops. Also, you don't repeat the same mistake which otherwise would have occurred in all the 50 slides. So if I create just 5-10 slides and I give me a feedback, I'm not going to repeat the same mistake in remaining 40 slides. So automatically the quality improves of the output. So as a concept, it's simple concept that you break the work into small parts and you iterate by having the plan, do, check, adjust cycle, so that you get frequent opportunities to see if what is working, not working, and then learn from it, and then make your work better and better with every cycle. Short cycles, basically. Same thing will apply to renovating your house and so on and so forth. So these are like some simple personal projects, you may say. So for example, doing this presentation is also a project. Creating a book is also a project. Renovating my house is also a project. Likewise, studying for some exam is also a project. And there also, on a personal projects, we can apply this concept. It has nothing to do with software. It's a concept which basically tells us that if I work in small steps, short chunks, you will be in better control of the work instead of the work taking over control of your situation. And you will learn faster. You will learn quickly, where you can minimize the mistakes that you otherwise would have made several times. So the Scrum, as a, meaning any agile approach, Scrum is one of them. Like we saw, it's based on this empiricism and lean thinking. So what we discussed so far was about empiricism, basically experiential learning, and bringing that learning into the context of the project so that we become better at it. Continuous improvement happens in the product, in the process, etc. So that what we build at the end of the day is not done with a lot of anxiety, but with a confidence and proper quality. Now, the second aspect of this agile approach is that it is based on lean thinking. So one is empiricism, second is lean thinking. So we'll now spend some time, maybe a few slides on lean thinking. Now, what is lean? You might have heard of this already. If not, we'll see. Now, as a concept, just to explain the concept, I'll use a very simple example to illustrate what is lean thinking. Of course, then we'll see how it applies to any project or software development also. But just to illustrate a concept of lean thinking, let's use one simple example. And again, in my opinion, this concept or this thought process or this lean thinking applies anywhere, your day-to-day life also. It has nothing to do with software only. Let's see how it can apply to even day-to-day stuff. So I'll take an example from a day-to-day world itself. So let's say, for example, I wish to have masala dosa today, and I decide to go out to some restaurant and have that dosa outside. Let's say, I'm not sure if you're all from Pune, but there's a famous restaurant here which is very well known for this and is always crowded, obviously. So let's say I decide to go there. Now, as a result, what is my experience now? I am a customer, so I want to have masala dosa. On a busy day, I want to have a quick food served to me, and I wish to have masala dosa at my favorite restaurant. But what my experience will be is as follows. Most of the times on a busy day, I will go to the restaurant and I will have to wait to find a place in that restaurant because it will be full at some busy time of the day if I visit there. So let's say I wait for some 10-15 minutes to find a place. Then somebody will give me a table. So I find a table. Now I'll wait for the waiter to come to the table. So because it's a busy day, so waiter is also busy going to the other tables, etc. So I'm waiting for the waiter to at least give me a menu card for 5 minutes. Then eventually I decide anyways I don't need a menu card. I know what I want. So I place my order. Now the waiter goes, but the order waits at the kitchen counter because there are many other people and there are lots of orders and there is only so many people who are available at the kitchen counter. So now the order is going to wait. My order is going to wait at the kitchen counter for 10 minutes. Now somebody will pick the order, make the masala dosa. That will take maybe 5 minutes for that cook to make the dosa. Now the ready dosa will wait at the counter, right? Because the dosa is ready, it's placed at the counter, but the waiter is not available because he or she is busy serving other tables. So the ready dosa waits at the counter. Then eventually the waiter gets the dosa hurriedly and puts it on my table. But in that process, he forgets to give me the bowl of chutney and spoons. So now I wait for that spoons, etc., to be given to me. Eventually, I get everything. Then I finish my dosa. Hopefully, I find it satisfactory enough. Let's say this is my experience. This is my experience. The very simple example of you going to some place. I'm sure this is how it must have been for most of us. Now, if you think from a customer point of view, that is me being a customer, how long it took from the order to delivery. That is, I went to the restaurant and I wanted to have something till the time I got something actually delivered to me. What was my experience? What is the total time that it took? And it is called as lead time, the time for which the customer waits for something to get delivered to that person. So it took about 35 minutes for the dosa to be served to me on my table so that I can start eating, because that is where the value will be delivered to me as a customer when I see the dosa which I can eat into. That took 35 minutes for the whole thing, out of which about 25 to 28 minutes was about the work waiting or the order waiting somewhere or the person waiting somewhere. It was basically a lot of wait time in between. And those steps, meaning there are steps in this flow which were actually not adding any value from a customer point of view. As a customer, I wanted something which is valuable, which is dosa, to be delivered to me quickly. I want a quick service and also quality. Quick and quality service is what I want, is all of us want. Our customers also want us to be much quicker, giving quality delivery. And in this flow, that is how the work flows from one end to the other, it is taking something and the customer feel that it's too long, it's too slow, it's not very efficient. That is what the customer here feels, and that is how our customers also feel, that we are not very efficient, we are too slow in handling their requests and so on and so forth. However, the work goes through different steps and not every step is adding value because it's causing some wait in between or a delay or a back and forth of the work. So now if you visualize this whole thing, you start wondering, can this be quicker? So if I'm a restaurant owner now, and if I put myself into the customer's shoe, I can see how the customer feels when it is so much delayed and so much slow service. So I want to expedite this. I want to make this more efficient. I want to make this quicker, not by adding more people, not by adding more waiters, or not by adding more staff at the kitchen counter. That is not the idea. Can I make this experience quicker without adding more people or making them work extra hours or on the weekends? Can I make this quicker? Hmm? So that is where you start visualizing some of the steps which are not adding any value from the customer point of view, and they're basically causing delays. And you start thinking about ways and means to eliminate these delays, get rid of these delays, or at least reduce them if you cannot eliminate them, and start thinking about some countermeasures where you can uh, make this whole thing quicker, not by throwing more people, not by working overnight or extra hours, and not by scrambling somehow. It is systematic work only, but by eliminating some of these delays in the whole flow of the work. And that's where maybe as a restaurant owner, maybe I start visualizing that maybe this can be the to be state of my restaurant, which will give a much better customer's experience. Like, for example, if I were the customer, maybe it's all automated where I can place my order, right? I can place my dosa order. So I book my, I locate which restaurant I want, I locate what I want, and I place my order. It's all automated so that the table is booked, the order is already placed using maybe some kind of app or something like that. So that when I arrive at the restaurant, the table is available to me, dosa is made available to me within few minutes. I don't have to wait because the system already knows that somebody is expected at this time and he expects to eat this. So the table is reserved. The food that was expected is also ordered well in time, and it's just made in time, just in time, prepared and served to me. And also you make sure that the process is fixed where the dosa leaves the kitchen counter with the bowl of chutney and the spoon always. The chutney and the spoon are not placed somewhere else. It's at the kitchen counter itself where every plate gets served with that itself so that you don't miss it. And then the customer gets the dosa. You finish it within maybe 10 minutes or so, 10-15 minutes, you're done. So now you're, as a customer, you get quicker service. It's delivered to you much quicker without compromising quality, or maybe with a better quality, and you get a quick output, not by adding extra waiters or extra staff at the kitchen counter or making them work extra hours or something like that, but by eliminating some of these in between steps which were probably not adding so much value. And if you think like this, that is, how is the work happening in my context, how is it flowing through, which all steps it goes through, and which all steps are actually adding value, and which steps are not adding value. And if there are steps which are not adding value, can I eliminate those? And if you start thinking like this, then it becomes the concept is called lean thinking. You're trying to make the flow lean by getting rid of some of the fat in that overall flow of work. It's also called as value stream. The concept is that the work should flow like a stream. Work should flow like a stream, like a river from one end to the other without stopping, blocking in between, ideally. It won't be like this. It will be like what you are seeing here with all these as delays, which is okay. But you make at least this visible so that you start wondering that, oh, actually the work is not flowing like a stream. It's broken. The value stream is broken. Which all steps it is going through, which steps are adding value, which steps are not adding value. And then any such steps which are not adding value will be targeted systematically to either eliminate them or to reduce them. You may not eliminate everything, but then you can reduce some of these delays for sure. Then you focus there, not on adding more people or asking people to work extra hours or something like that, but by spotting such delays. So if you think like this and start visualizing the full flow of work, that concept is called lean thinking. And every agile approach is based on also lean thinking. Now, if you relate this, so what we saw was masala dosa example, but as a concept, it will apply anywhere. And maybe now this is an example for some software or an IT context where the customer, this yellow sticky is like the customer request. They ask something, and then the work is going to flow through some steps. In our context also, it'll go through one step, then next step, then next step, and so on and so forth. And it is going to take some time, and that lead time is something. And there will be delays. The work will wait. The work will go back and forth. For example, after development, when it goes to testing, the environments will not work. It will be broken. It will wait. The testing will find bugs. Bugs will wait. There's a fix that will come. Now the fix will not work, and all of that. These things don't add value from a customer point of view. It's increasing lead time. So now we apply that concept here. Uh, Visualize the flow of work. Is it flowing like a value stream where the work is flowing like a stream where every step is adding value? Any step which is not adding value, you spot those. For example, this step not adding value, this step not adding value, etc. And then you try to start finding out if I can save a week here, maybe save 2 weeks here, and so on and so forth. And then find out how you can change something so that it can become quicker. That thought process or that way of working is called lean thinking. So lean thinking means looking at the timeline from when the customer gives an order till the time we collect cash. That is concept to cash, right from the customer requesting something till the time customer gets it and we get the cash. So this full flow and reducing the timeline, that time for which the customer waits for the whole thing to happen, we reduce that timeline by reducing the non-value added wastes. That is how maybe we should be looking at the work. This concept originated from manufacturing actually, not software development. Yeah, it's actually come from Toyota production system. And there are quite a few concepts which originated from there. Something that I explained you with masala dosa example is applicable anywhere. It originated from Toyota production system. It was studied by a few people. It's called as lean. So the concept says that most of the problems with our process will surface as delays, which is very true. So most of the times the work will be crossing one department to the other. It will wait in between. It will go back and forth. People are not on the same page. Your clarifications wait and so on and so forth. Most of the time spent in getting to market, your time to market is a result of these delays. And reducing these delays is the fastest way to reduce the time to market, not by throwing more people, not by scrambling, not by working extra hours, but by systematically eliminating some of these delays. So maybe we should work with that kind of a mindset, and that thinking is called as lean thinking. So to summarize, basically they say identify what is valuable to the customer. In this case, maybe dosa delivered quickly. Quick service and quality dosa. That is what is valuable. Map the value stream. How is it flowing right now? So the customer comes, waits for the table, waits for the waiter, the order waits, the dosa waits. That is the current flow. Then establish the flow. That is try to eliminate these things. So make the workflow without interruptions. do something for it. Maybe you can automate certain things, you can change something in the process, change the way of working. Maybe three people sit together, it can be quicker, something like that. It is not going to be perfect in one go. Things don't change like that. It will take some time. So pursue perfection. Don't give up. Make small changes and improve that value stream, that is flow of work, and make it flow without or as less interruptions as possible. And work with that mindset. And that kind of working is called as lean thinking. Now, if you relate it back to the agile approach, where we work with iterations every 2 weeks, 2 weeks, now you marry the two, that is agile and lean. So every 2 weeks we try to work on something, plan, do, check, adjust, find out what is breaking the flow, what is not working, what is causing inefficiency, make some adjustment. Next 2 weeks, make some adjustment. Next 2 weeks, and keep doing it. Continuous improvement, and that is how maybe hopefully things will also become more efficient as well as effective. So that is where lean and agile uh, can come together or can be combined. And most of the approaches that we see, like Scrum or whatever, there's a combination of these. As we saw in that first line of Scrum guide, it's based on empiricism and lean thinking. So lean focuses on how can we deliver something quicker, better, cheaper, by reducing the lead time, removing non-value added steps, and so on and so forth. Whereas agile is more about how do you bring in flexibility, because what if some change is required? So can we adapt to quickly changing, maybe the product, maybe the approach, maybe the technology, or the teams, whatever changes. So being flexible to changes. So on one side we need speed, quicker deliveries. On the other side we need adaptability to changes. So that's how the lean and agile concepts can be married together. Finally, customer should see the value. So that's how then agile can also help in bringing or accelerating the value delivery, where you start delivering something small in small increments. And as you start seeing something coming out every few weeks, you obviously start see the value for the money that you are paid for. Now, as you talk about value, and we talked about it a few times, that is, identify something which is valuable to customer, etc. So let's spend a few minutes to also see what is meant by value. What do you mean by value? Now, just to illustrate this better, let's look at these two concepts: output and outcome. Output and outcome. Now, whatever I deliver, whatever I create, whatever artifact that I create, I might be a software developer who may code something. I might be a pre-sales person who may uh, pitch in for more uh, or newer business opportunities, and I present something to somebody. I do presentation to somebody. That's an output. That's an output that I deliver. Outcome is the consequence of that. That is, I produce some output, and then that output is used by somebody or is found to be useful by somebody, worthy enough by somebody. Then that somebody sees value in it because they find that output solving their business problem. So finally, we are in the business of solving business problems. So whatever we create as a deliverable, if it doesn't solve somebody's business problem, the outcome might be zero. You might have delivered the output, outcome might be zero. So if you see this picture, the beneficiary of this toy is something that we are delivering, or this guy is delivering, but it is for this baby, right? The beneficiary is this baby. The parents feel that they have delivered the best possible output. If you think from the baby's point of view, the baby might be wondering, what is this I'm seeing? Right? So is this a better outcome that I have achieved? The parents may feel that I have delivered. So like this, every engineer feels that he or she has delivered the best software. But is it solving somebody's business problem? If not, the customer might be actually wondering like this as to what you have delivered is not really useful for me, in which case the outcome becomes zero. The best example to illustrate output and outcome is Google. You must have seen this a few times already. If not, as you read a little bit more about value delivery, you will see this example quoted a few times. Now, if you see Google, and I'm sure there is hardly anybody or rather nobody who doesn't like Google, right? So I have not come across anybody who doesn't like Google. We all like it. We all like this product, not because it's of its output. The output is fairly straightforward. I mean, if you if you see Google's web page, it's a simple text box. There's hardly any features in that, and the output is also displayed in a very simplistic manner. What is more important is this, because I get something what I want in a fraction of a second, right? I leave this website in a fraction of a second or in a few seconds, which is why I like this website, because I find what I want within few seconds. And that is why I like this product, not because it has some nice looking or jazzy features, because it delivers the outcome. It solves my business problem, right? That is why I keep coming back to this. So more output may not necessarily mean more outcome. So delivering more features, delivering more capabilities in the product doesn't mean that it's going to be found useful by the end customers. So that is where some people also did some survey, and they noticed that about um, 7% features are always used, whereas about 45% features of any product are never used. Hmm? And I think there is something called as the 80-20 rule. So you must have heard of something called Pareto law. The same thing here, but applied in this context. So about less than 20% of features of any product will provide more than 80% of the value of that product. This is very true. Look at any product that you use as a customer. Look at Google Pay, look at Ola or Uber Cab, Swiggy, Amazon, whatever your bank's application, whatever application you use as a customer. Look at Excel, for example. How many features it has? Hundreds of it. How many you really use? Often or always? Less than 20%. Uh, so more features doesn't mean that we're solving somebody's business problem. So that is where and anyways, if you're building it incrementally, it's small chunks, might as well focus on those 20% of the features first, and those most important or something which is going to be used more often by the end users. Focus on those first and build those first, so that we deliver those quickly into the hands of the customer. It's not about scrambling or rushing through it, but if we had to do 100 things, and if it was going to take 6 months, if we do only 20% of it, it's not going to take 6 months. Maybe a couple of months we are ready with a set of capabilities which is what mattered the most to the end users, and actually it can be used by somebody, so that we start getting the feedback, and then they start seeing the value in a very short time. So agile approach, since we work iteratively and incrementally, can also help to reduce the time to market. That means we can be ready with something which can be shipped into the hands of the end users with this 20-30% of the features, which are something which are used more often in a much shorter time, and start getting the feedback from that and adapt based on that. So then less features can actually become more valuable to us, meaning producing less features or doing or less code also can start giving us useful feedback about that software, so that we can evolve based on the actual feedback and not some assumed list of features. So that is where the value concept comes in. So in summary, basically, some people felt that it is better to break the work that we do into small chunks. Let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And let's convert them into iterations, repeated cycles. And the repeated cycles could be of this or whatever suits your context. Now, in each of that cycle of 3 weeks, there'll be a list of things that we have to do. It could be the study that I have to do for 8, 9 subjects, or it could be the book that I have to write, or it could be my renovation of house, or it could be a software. Whatever it is, I will have a list of things to do. I'll prioritize, pick the most important or the most complex part first into that iteration, plan, do, check, adjust, and then create a small part. And then keep doing this every few weeks, and review this every few weeks, so that you keep getting feedback every few weeks. And of course, if there is a team that is required who will be, I mean, some engineers who will actually convert this wish list into the working increments. So, and that's how we start collaborating very closely with each other all throughout. And some people felt that this way of working will give the desired flexibility. It will be more flexible to changes. We can also focus on those wastes and shortening the lead times and surfacing what is working, not working, what are the blockers, where the value stream is broken once every 3 weeks, and then systematically eliminate those so that we also can become more efficient or shorter lead times. And some people were convinced that this approach will be better than the traditional approach. They called this as an agile approach. Now, as I mentioned some time back, several people had their own way of working already being tried out on projects somewhere in the 90s. So some people had come up with this iterative incremental approach. They had called it as Scrum. Some had come up with their own way of working, called it as XP. Some had called it as feature driven development, and so on and so forth. So these people were trying this concept on their projects in different parts of the geography. Somewhere in 2001, all these people, actually practitioners, they came together because they were talking about the same concept, which was this, that is iterations and incremental short loops, feedbacks and adjustments and so on. So these people came together and then they decided to unify under one single umbrella. And that's where all these approaches were collectively termed as agile approaches. So agile is like a concept, and then Scrum is like one of the concrete implementation of that concept under that umbrella of agile. Like Scrum, there are other methods also available, like shown on this slide, but Scrum happens to be the most popular or widely used approach under this umbrella. So that's the most commonly used approach. So the Scrum approach, I'll just briefly cover this and then maybe we'll pause for questions if any. So Scrum is one of these methods under the umbrella of Agile. So like Scrum, there are other options also. Now this Scrum approach, what is Scrum is what briefly we'll see, is the one which is used more often or it's more popular in the industry. Close to about 70% or so projects which use Agile approaches, they use Scrum. That's what generally, roughly the split is. So you can see how much popular this particular approach is. So we'll see briefly what this means. The same concept is same, but now being a specific method under the umbrella of Agile, it has its own some rituals and some terminologies. Now the picture that you see here is of the game of rugby. Hmm? And the Scrum is a concept which is actually picked up from this game of rugby. And that is because uh, these people wanted to compare and contrast the traditional approach with this Scrum based approach, where some people felt that the traditional approach was more like a relay race, where unless you pass the baton to the next person, the next step will not start. Whereas the Scrum approach is more like the game of rugby, where all the members involved in that team, they have to work together. They have to pass that ball continuously from one to the other and take it from one end to the other. And uh, and the teams who play this the rugby as a game, they come together, they huddle together to plan their next move, and that place where they huddle together, or that event where they come and huddle together, is called Scrum. So that is where this name has been picked up from. And the idea is that there's no baton passing. Nobody's. It's not sequential. It's all throughout. So we analyze, we build, we test. We do all of this all throughout uh, as a whole team. Once every 10 weeks, we work together and produce something. So that's where the origin of it lies. Now, what is Scrum? In general, if I have to describe Scrum, which is also an agile approach, it is also iterative, it is also incremental, then it will have this kind of a structure. So the Scrum says that you should have a product backlog. Now, what it means is a list of things that you want to do in a product. It's a to-do list. So it's like a requirements of that, whatever you want to do. The product backlog, something that you wish to do in the product. It's a product backlog. And there should be a role called product owner, who is like the customer of that product, or who represents the customer of that product, and he or she will own this product backlog, because the customer is the right person to say what we need next or what's the next right thing to do. There will be a team, a small Scrum team. Usually the Scrum team size is small, about 7-8 people. Less than 10 people is what Scrum Guide says. But it's a cross-functional team. That means all the skills across whatever functions who need to work together need to be on the same team. So for example, if you need a user experience UX person along with maybe a database person along with some Java developer along with a tester and a business analyst or product owner, then all of them will be part of the same Scrum team. So it's cross-functional. So they sit together, they plan together, work together, so that there is less handoff back and forth. It's the cross-functional team. And these teams will work in iterations, which are called as sprints. So we talked about iterations, repeated cycles. They are termed as sprints in Scrum. And Scrum says that your iterations or sprints should be between 1 to 4 weeks. That means anything which is less than 1 month cycles is okay. 1 week to 1 month window. Each of this sprint or each of this iteration will begin with a formal event called sprint planning meeting, where the team sits with the product owner, goes through this to-do list, and then comes up with some kind of a plan, something that the team feels that they can accomplish in the next iteration or sprint cycle, let's say 10 days. And they come up with something called as a sprint backlog. It's a to-do for the next 10 days. So sprint backlog is a short-lived 10 days kind of a list of things that the team will work on. And it's an output of this planning that the team creates. Then this sprint backlog sets the stage for the next iteration, because the team now knows what they are going to do and how they are going to do this, and then they execute it. They work on this. During that iteration or during the sprint, every day they will have a daily scrum sync up, quick 15 minutes where all these 8-10 people will come together, quickly review the progress and see if there is any adjustment required, anybody needs help, etc. It's a quick sync up, about 15 minutes. Now, once the team has created a sprint backlog and decided a direction, now there should not be any change in direction from the outside world onto the team's work, because otherwise the team will lose focus, right? So once the team has decided that this is what they will accomplish, let them stay focused on that particular goal. Do not disturb them. That is the idea, because otherwise then everything will be half done. You won't get what was planned. You may not get what was newly introduced, etc. There's a focus also required. Now, if you cannot hold on to these changes and you cannot leave the team stay focused for too long, then choose shorter sprint lengths. But once the sprint has begun and it has started its journey, then the direction of that sprint should not be changed, especially by outside stakeholders. Then as the sprint ends, you end the iteration, then you will have a review done, where at the end of the sprint, uh, whatever we accomplished as an output will be now reviewed between the team and the product owner. Again, they will come together and then the product owner will have a look at it and give a feedback, whether they find it okay, not okay, whatever it is. It's a feedback basically. And the whole thing, the whole iteration ends with a retrospective, where the team reflects back on the last 10 days or whatever length of sprint we took to basically find out what went well, what can be changed, so that the next sprint cycle can become better. So if you just relate to the concept of plan, do, check, adjust, you will see that it's brought in here. All these Scrum events basically mimic that plan, do, check, adjust cycle. So it starts with sprint planning, which is nothing but the plan step. Then you do the sprint, which is where you have daily stand-ups happening or daily scrums happening. Then at the end of the sprint, you have a sprint review, which is where you check whether you reached where you were supposed to reach. And at the end, you retrospect to find out any adjustments for the subsequent sprint, so that these adjustments will go back as a loop back into the feedback for the next sprint planning, so that you will bring in that continuous improvement. So the concept of PDCA cycle, which is a concept, is now maybe put into practice. So if I'm following Scrum, I should have sprints. The sprint should be between 1 to 4 weeks. I should have a product backlog. I should have a product owner who represents my customer. I should have a Scrum team. We sit together, start every sprint with sprint planning, decide what's the direction for the next 10 weeks only. So small chunks, less work, less unknowns, more chances of being predictable. Then execute that plan, do. Then at the end of the sprint, we check along with the product owner again to see whether we have reached where we wanted to reach, and then reflect and adjust. That is, if we have not, find out what is to change and make adjustment, the continuous improvements. So these are some of the events that the Scrum as a framework proposes these things. So Scrum says that you should have a product backlog. The product backlog should be owned by one person, which is product owner, who represents the customer. Then there has to be a team, a cross-functional team. The team will create a team backlog or a sprint backlog, which should be for every sprint cycle. It gets created in sprint planning meeting and gets reviewed throughout the sprint during daily stand-up or daily scrums. At the end of the sprint, you should have a small increment, small part, which is ready, whatever output you wanted to create. And then you review that. You review that with your product owner to get a feedback. At the end, you do some retrospective to just reflect back on what is working, not working. Now, to make sure that all these events happen and it's done in the true spirit and the right practices are brought in, the lean concept is brought in, the thinking is brought in. You need somebody to coach the teams in the right direction, and that is where you have a Scrum Master role, who will facilitate all these events and bring in this required mindset change, practices, coaching at the team level. So that's how the framework says. Maybe these are the basic building blocks of the framework. Concept is same. Its intention is to bring agility, flexibility, iterations, etc. But now there are some specific terminologies. So that's a little bit about Agile and one of the frameworks under Agile umbrella, which is Scrum. Now, briefly, last couple of topics, then we'll open it for questions for the last maybe 20-25 minutes. Now that's where it is. I mean, it originated from software somewhere in 2001, formally unified under one single umbrella, Agile. It's been around for 20 plus years now. So what's the future? Where do we see it going? Now, since this approach has found its feet to some extent in software industry, again, by no means it's like fully matured and super perfect. Of course, there are areas for improvement even in software, but now slowly there will be increasing adoption of this approach in non-software industries, and it is already happening. I am currently working with a customer which is not software or IT. They are from automobile domain. In the past, also 2-3 years back, I had worked on with one of the customers who was not from the software background, but a non-IT customer. I'm also doing some trainings for some of the customers. Like for example, I did a session for one of the car manufacturers around agile approaches, and they were quite. I mean, they were already trying a few things in their context. So it's slowly getting into that. Again, how it is working in IT or software, for sure it will need its own tweaking and tailoring when it goes to the other context. Conceptually, it can be applied. The plan, do, check, adjust cycles, the frequent feedback, all that conceptually it can apply. In fact, the lean thinking has come from manufacturing itself, automobile domain itself. So it can very well be applicable in other domains. However, the way we practice it in software, obviously it will be changed a bit to suit their context. Uh, Obviously it is finding some, or it is already generating interest in the other industries. That is because of the increased flexibility that the approach provides. Also, there is a quality improvement that automatically happens. Like I mentioned some time back, if I have to write a book and if I work only on 10 pages and I get a feedback, I will not make the same mistakes in the remaining 190 pages for sure. So I automatically improve quality of the output that comes out. So the next proofreading that will happen should not have the same mistakes pointed out. It will find something else maybe. And after a few iterations, it will find nothing. So the quality automatically gets built into the product. So there is an increased focus on quality. There is increased flexibility, which is why this method is called agile. And it also focuses a lot on collaboration of across all functions. Like we talked about a cross-functional team. Uh, this method has a great emphasis on continuous improvements and a learning culture because of its iterative process, the plan, do, check, adjust, the regular feedbacks that it generates, the retrospectives that we do. So these are some of the valid reasons why the other industries will obviously find some value in trying it out. It may not obviously work as it is working in software. Your sprint planning will be quite different when you do it maybe with an automobile customer, not like software. But conceptually, you can very well start maybe experimenting something. This method also is very well suited or becomes more suitable for some digital transformation kind of initiatives, which is where there will be software involvement anyways, especially with today's fast pace of changing technologies. The approach which is flexible to changes will be more valuable. Also, I think it will find its relevance more with emerging technologies, especially like artificial intelligence. Now, you must have heard of Chat GPT or OpenAI and all of that. This whole concept of artificial intelligence, even if you consider Chat GPT, it's based on some models which learn based on feedback. So it's a data based on which they interpret. They make some. I mean, the machine or the tool makes a decision. The decision has to be validated by somebody. If it is a wrong decision, it learns. In fact, you teach that model. It goes through learning cycles, and don't then only it becomes a more relevant tool or an automated mechanism with artificial intelligence. So the whole um, uh, the whole concept of artificial intelligence relies on quick learning based on the data that you have and the decisions that the tools are making. So it needs early short learning cycles anyways. So this approach of shorter learning cycles and iterations and early adaptations, I think is very well suited for especially the emerging technologies of artificial intelligence. So it will find its relevance there for sure, because there you need this whole concept of early learning cycles. And of course, nowadays we are seeing increased use of Agile at large scale projects. So in the early days of Agile, it was used on small projects. But now, again, it's nothing new. Now it's already a reality that we are using Agile at large scales with geographically distributed large programs with lots of people working together. And there are already frameworks for it in the market. So it's no more a future, it's already reality, but it will continue to be leveraged on larger and larger programs at scale. So these are some of the still the areas where Agile will find its relevance in the coming years. I don't know for how long it will be relevant. Anyways, that's fine. It's as a concept. I think it will be applicable. Um, Now, if I want to learn more about this concept, so you can find some useful. Again, I have included a few links which, based on my personal experience, which I found useful. Again, there's a lot of content available on the internet, obviously, but these are some useful links which I found useful during my journey. So first link, Mountain Goat Software, is an excellent website if you are new to Agile. So I've included the link. I'll share those offline. If you want to know more about Scrum, there's a Scrum guide freely available, downloadable, 16 pages only. You can feel free to read that. There are frameworks for using Agile at scale, which is Scaled Agile Framework. It's again freely available source of knowledge. You can explore this. There's also something called Nexus from Scrum, which is also a framework for using Agile with larger teams. So if you are interested in seeing something around that, you can explore Nexus. There are some useful books which you can read. Again, this is something that I have read and found useful. There could be lots of other books which I have not read, but this is based on my limited insight into these books. So I've included some. I think this is a very nice book. It has nothing to do with Agile, but it explores these concepts of bottlenecks and lean and all of that. So it's a nice book. This is also around lean concepts. Again, and it actually explores a case study from Harley Davidson, which is not a software or IT industry. So if you want to know how this concept has been leveraged in non-IT, it's an excellent book. Actual case studies of how Harley Davidson used some of these concepts of lean agile, etc. So I'll share these separately with all of you, or you can take a screenshot of this if you wish to. Now about certifications, again, briefly, if I want to get some beginner level knowledge and also maybe some credential, or a more advanced level knowledge and some credential uh, which somebody certifies my skills and knowledge. This is some of the options. Again, I put the star mark stating clearly that these are not the only options, but these are some which are pretty, I would say, popular in the market. Most of the people pursue these or one of these. So that is why I've included these. There are others also available. Um, Again, the cost or other pricing and other information that I've mentioned here is tentative and indicative. Please refer to the respective links, which I have also included here to know exact pricing and all of that. This is a rough indicative pricing that I have included. So if you want to start with like a beginner level knowledge about these approaches or some basic level certification, then the first two rows will be good options, CSM or PSM. Again, this is for a Scrum Master role. These two are from two different institutions. Scrum Alliance is a separate body. Scrum.org is a separate body. But both of these are similar. So you can do either one of them, not both. Either one of them is fine. PSM1 as such doesn't require any training as a prerequisite. If you're already familiar with this, you can directly go for the certification without a training. The CSM has a typical standard pattern of training plus exam. So it'll have a 2 days training that you have to attend from Scrum Alliance, and then there will be an exam. If you want to know or use this at scale, that is use Agile at scale, then Scaled Agile Academy is a institution which provides some of these options, certification options. Again, these are role based. So if I'm just a team member, maybe this is more suitable for me. If I'm a Scrum Master, maybe this is more suitable for me. If I'm a lead or a manager, this is more suitable for me. Of course, there are other options for product owner, product manager, and other role based things. I've included some here. You can find more on their website, scaledagile.com/training. The pricing I've indicated, again, as I mentioned, it's a bit indicative, not the exact price here. There could be slight change. So you can find exact pricing and all those information on their respective links. The other option which is available for Agile certifications from PMI, Project Management Institute, is PMI SCP. Again, PMI also offers Disciplined Agile also as another a course, but that's not very popular, so I have not included it here. But that is another option. If you go to pmi.org, and the link is, I have included the link, you will again find the details there. So these are some of the certifications which generally people do, something which is more popular. Okay, so that's it from my side. There are still 20 minutes left in the session, and I hope you are still awake. So if there are any questions, any doubts, then feel free to shoot those. I will be more than happy to answer those. If there's already something added in the chat window, then let me have a look at it. I'll go through it quickly, and then maybe we can pick it from there. If not, feel free to directly start asking your questions now also. So we have 20 more minutes. That's it from the content point of view. I will have a look at the chat window. Okay, so I don't see any questions in the chat. There was some question on the recording. Looks like we are recording it. So about recording, I will let Preeti or somebody answer. About the content, Agile, Lean, etc. If there is any question, let me know. Any questions from anyone? I hope I'm audible, guys. Hello?
Yes, Sachin, you are quite audible.
Okay. Okay, so I don't see any question in the chat window. If there is any other specific question, feel free to put it now. I've left last 20 minutes for that. And if there is no question at all, then I guess I'm done from my side. We can maybe wrap up early as well.
Sachin, this is Navjot.
Sir.
Yeah, sir, just one question. I mean, like you said that you have been not only training but also consulting organization, helping them, adopt Agile and
Mhm,
Scrum.
mhm,
So if I may ask, what is the like most common challenge you face? Because we as a vendor, we get a lot of inquiries from our different, small, big, medium-sized clients that they are in process of adopting
mm,
Agile in Scrum manner or some another. I mean, so they take different approaches. Some companies, they focus a lot on getting people certified, which is one of the prerequisite, or I
mm.
would say that very popular. And there are companies which make a combination of like hiring a agile consultant and getting people certified. So as a consultant, what has been your, very common challenge which is being faced very regularly while an organization or a team adopting to agile methods or, Scrum to be particular?
Biggest challenge that I have faced obviously is the change, acceptance of the change or the inertia that usually we will carry, because people are used to certain way of working, and when we ask people to start delivering something every 2 weeks by breaking into small parts, that is the first thing that people will find it very difficult. So it's a mindset change. I would say that's the toughest or the most challenging part, because the whole concept talks about, or it introduces some of the techniques which are very counterintuitive. It is not very very common thing that is something that we are used to. So naturally, there's a tendency of not being very open to it, or at times we resist it. Not everyone, but that is the biggest challenge. Um, and sometimes we start with this. Um Slowly as we progress further, the this approach starts surfacing more and more gaps, more and more needs for changes, saying something is not working and we need to change, something is not working and we need to change. Now that sometimes um, has to be prioritized properly and focused accordingly. And if we do not change anything, nothing will improve, right? To improve is to change. And sometimes that continuity of changes, we don't have to make some big bang change. The idea is not to become perfect in next few weeks. Idea is to become better than what we are today, so that week by week we it's a long term thing. But this is the challenge, in the sense accepting some of the things, mindset wise, willing to uh, be open for some of the changes, because you have to unlearn few things, not just learn, unlearn few things. And more experienced you are, more gray hair or less hair, whatever happens early you have, more difficult you will find it to accommodate that change or resist to change. And Newton's first law, everybody continues in his state of inertia unless it is pushed. So that is the biggest challenge. I think certifications etc is okay. I Again, it's my personal view. It's not necessary that 100 people have to be certified and then you transition to this. It's not about that, because you might be certified scrum master and you might still be actually a drum master on the ground. Doesn't really help. So certification is okay. I'm not against it, but that doesn't address this problem. Yes, it will give you common knowledge, education, etc., but that you can do with maybe normal training sessions also. Don't have to get certified. Again, you can, but then it can be a later step where you have become more uh, aware of it and more experienced, knowledgeable about it. Then you can go for a certification. But to start with certification, sometimes I feel, because it's an investment, and I'm not sure if it gives you the right orientation, because actually learning by doing is what will happen in the first few months of this
Right.
journey, which is important. After that, certification is okay, because then it will ratify your experience with this method. At least that is my personal view. So the biggest challenge, to answer your question, is acceptance of some of these changes. Again, I'm not saying everyone is like that. There are people who will be open, but in general it's like a half-hearted thing. So that becomes a sometimes a challenge, but it's okay if you persist with it for a while. It will happen. You should not give up in between. Then it'll be a half-baked thing. It will not show value.
Thanks a lot, Sachin. I guess we have a question from Vivek. Vivek, please.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for this session. See, I have one question on which method, whether to use agile or waterfall. Like, how do you determine
How did?
not all projects are suitable for agile and vice versa. Also,
That is correct. Yeah.
uh, is there like any tool or any guideline, which is more suitable?
Yeah. So broadly, meaning there is no a tool as such, but there is a guidance. So let me open this. So I've just reshared. I hope the slide is coming up. So basically, it's a complexity assessment technique. It's also called as a Kuhn model. We can use that to assess what is the nature of the work that we are doing, and then which method will be suitable for this. Now, basically what it shows is there'll be some unknowns or uncertainty, and two parameters are being taken, maybe some requirements and your technology. If you have more unknowns, more variables, more chances of or more elements which are vague or unknowns, and it's a bit complex or complicated, then an approach which will give you early feedback so that you can make early adjustments, because that is where when there is more unknowns and it becomes a complicated work to deal with, that is where your decisions are not likely to be correct, and that is where we need early feedback to make the course correction. So any such work which is more unknowns, or which has more unknowns and hence more complex or complicated, is more suitable for an iterative approach, because the iterations give you the early feedback which gives you an opportunity to make timely adjustments. But a work which is more straightforward laid out, you have done this several times before, fairly comfortable with it, hardly any unknowns, then the shorter iterations, etc., may not be necessary, because you don't really need that frequent feedback, because the path is clearly laid out. You can clearly travel that journey without much hiccups. In which case, agile may not be also used, and the waterfall approach is fine with it, because you don't really need early feedback opportunities. So there's no formula driven thing, but you can come up with some kind of an assessment of a context on a scale of let's say 1 to 5 and a few parameters, and you can assess those, and then it will tell us whether we are in which zone. The nature of work that we are working on is, if it is more complex, complicated, unknowns, amount of unknowns, uncertainty, basis that we can make the distinction. So you are right. It is not that always you have to use agile, or always waterfall is never suitable. ऐसा नहीं है. So it depends on the context. So we can assess the context and then make a choice. So that this is a underlying model which sometimes is used to make those assessments. And there are some assessment templates available. Like you can get some parameters around requirement and technology, some question, there's answer yes, no, and all that. And it gives you an assessment as to what is the nature of the work looking like. And then based on some score, we decide whether it is agile or waterfall, or how many iterations or shorter iterations or longer iterations with agile. All that can be worked out. Again, it's just an indication for a choice to be made. I hope that helps, Vivek.
Yes, Sachin, thank you.
Yeah, Prashant, I think looks like you have also raised your hand.
Uh, Hi Sachin, thank you for the session.
Yeah.
It was very informative. I have one question like if we plan something for the sprint and at the end of sprint we are not able to deliver that, so what
Hmm.
will be the plan of action against it? So how will come out of it?
Okay. So if I understand your question correctly, if I take something in the sprint planning and I work on the sprint, and at the end of the sprint I'm not able to complete it, then
Right.
how should I handle it? Yeah. So basically, the approach says that your sprint is a strict time box. That is, it ends at the end of, let's say, 10 days is what you take. The sprint is over. Now, if I have a half done work at the end of the iteration, then first thing is we should reflect on it as to figure out why did it not finish, meaning uh, what is the reason why we ended up with a half done work. Is it because we
Right.
overcommitted? Is it because it was way too complex, or whatever estimate was not incorrect? तो कुछ तो होगा. There has to be some reason
Because
for
of
that.
some blocker
Some
and
blockers,
something.
exactly. So is it because some environment issues were not there, or we
Yeah,
didn't get required
technical challenges.
clarification? Correct. So there has to be some reason for that. Now, if based on that, then we make a uh, accordingly and decision when we plan the next sprint planning. Obviously, the half done work will carry forward into the subsequent sprint as the backlog because it is not complete. So you take that work now. The challenge is if it's half done, I think that is what makes it a bit tricky to estimate how much more is remaining. Correct? I think that becomes a little bit of a challenge, but that's okay. Hopefully, it's some work which is half done. You take it now. Next sprint, you also have to add some more work. Now, how much to add and how much to plan with will depend on the assessment of this retrospective. Meaning, if it was because of some technical issues, that environment issues or required infrastructure or not or whatever, because of that you couldn't finish, and if that problem is not addressed as you start the next sprint, if that problem is not addressed, most likely that issue is going to continue in the next sprint. So there is no point in taking more work. Rather, you need to maybe invest some bandwidth in solving that problem, that blocker. So one or two people maybe should focus on see if you can fix that problem first instead of taking more work. So maybe in the next sprint you could take a little less work plus this carry forward work and see if that finishes. At the same time, somebody focuses on that blocker to see if that is taken out of your way. So that the subsequent sprint now you can plan better. That will be a better approach. But again, it depends on the context. I mean, it depends on what comes out as a result of retrospective. If it is not some blocker or environment issue, but it's pure over commitment, then you commit less maybe. Or if it was estimation which was not done correctly, maybe you correct estimates maybe. Or if it is like this is the team, we assumed some speed but we couldn't get it,
Yeah,
and we
we'll
have some
consider
team.
it as a feedback for the next sprint. Right.
Exactly. So if now I have this team, this is what is the team. I thought they will move faster, but they are slower. Maybe they have less experience, whatever. They need help. But that is what it is. Then in the next 10 days, the same speed will continue. No? So then accordingly, that adjustment will happen. So it depends on what comes out of the retrospective as a adjustment in the sense what's the inspect and adapt. Based on that, the subsequent sprint should be adjusted. For sure, the carried forward work continues into the next sprint plus some additional work will be taken. Now, how much to take, how to adjust, I think it should come from the retrospective. And that is where the team is part of all these events. The one who planned, the one who executed, the same set of people are reflecting on it. So they should then decide how much to take and make this rhythmic. So to start with, the sprints are not going to be predictable, right? So you take 10 things, you finish 6 things. वैसे होगा. But after 2, 3 or few cycles, you will realize and then you try to make it predictable. That will be the idea, and based on some actual experience that you get in the context of the team as to why it is not
Yes,
coming
yes.
out, your plan is not coming out, because the reason could be anything. It depends on the context.
Thank
Okay, anyone else?
Any more questions, anyone? Please. Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Sachin. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone for being such a amazing audience. And there would be a small feedback link that will be shared with everyone. Humbly request everyone to fill that.
Okay,
Thanks everyone. Thanks a lot.
thanks everyone, have a nice evening.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sachin.
bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
thank you,
Sachin.
sir.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.